What do you think of people from the USA saying they are Americans? Kind of denying, oh, I don't. Oh, okay. Yeah, that I remember. Wow, I remember having that discussion back in the 80s. Yeah. Look, I don't think it's I know language is important, right? That's why they changed it from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And the two continents are called North America and South America. So for United States people to call themselves Americans seems like they're dominating that sort of part of the name. But if we think of it like this, the name of the country is the United States of America. Business owner, educator, and lifelong observer of politics and economics, making sense of complex issues. The other countries are called Canada and Mexico and Ecuador and Brazil. They don't have that in their name. So for the Americans to call themselves Americans, I'm going to give them a pass on that because I don't think it's on the basis that they think that the continent only refers to them, but rather because of the name, the United States of America, you can then say they are Americans. I think it's fairly legitimate. Yeah, but see, the thing about Central America is there's no country that's named the something of Central America, and in that sense, if it was called the country of Central America, then you could call them Central Americans, right? So I think the basis of it is the name, not the any other form of psychological, domination of the two continents. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. No one's surprised about that. But I want to touch on this, and I hope I can get actually through this because it's really fresh in my brain right now. So I don't know if that's going to mean that it's all going to come out disconnected or that it's actually going to come out good because it is fresh in my brain. So I'll see how I go. Because you guys know I don't use a script. I can see other people doing lives and videos, and I can tell that they're reading. I don't use any script, and I'm pretty old. I'll try and do this justice. So, I want to apologize to. Also, okay, no, I'll just go with it and stop interrupting myself. I want to apologize to @Scott and Nicole. These are two people that commented on videos that I have going at the moment. And @Scott wrote a bunch of comments that were pretty much MAGA talking points. And I couldn't approve them. So that's why I'm apologizing. I couldn't approve them because you mentioned things that the algorithm doesn't like. And if I approved those comments after they'd been filtered, not that TikTok really punishes the creator for comments that go on, but it just can affect things. So rather than take that risk, I didn't approve the comments. So sorry. Then Nicole, who is commenting from Japan, your comment was approved, and I responded to it a bit snarky, and I apologize for that. So what did these two people say? Scott basically said that, and I'm going to have to be very roundabout here, so I'm going to refer to pew-pews, because I hate saying that. It makes me sound like I'm a child, but I'm going to say hardware or items instead. So Scott was saying that he had two main points. One was that Trump is stopping all the countries ripping off the US because they have been for the last 40 or 50 years. And that all the money that they are paying is now going to be distributed back to the American people as it should. And his second point was that he has a large amount of hardware items himself, about 26, I think he said, and that not one of those has ever been used to hurt someone, which is fantastic. And therefore he thinks that it's not the items, it's the people themselves. But it's kind of like me saying I have 26 cars and not one of them's ever had an accident. Yet the statistics still show that because there are lots of cars, there are lots of accidents. So I think it's pretty spurious to say that just because there are these items that you have that haven't done any harm, that it's not the items, it's the person, because you don't do harm. Therefore, it's absolutely fine. Obviously, and seriously, obviously, statistics show that having those items does not reduce the rate of crime. On the contrary, it actually increases it. So if you look at countries that have increased the availability of those items, South Africa, other countries, you find that crime actually goes up. If you look at countries that have reduced those items in society, you find that crime actually goes down. So to say that you need these items to deter criminal activity is not borne out by the statistics at all. And I was thinking of I think this is kind of stupid, but I was thinking like one of the things that kids get hassled for by adults these days is that they don't go outside and play anymore. And, one of the reasons is it's dangerous. It's just dangerous to go outside. And if we use the situation that's happening in schools as the argument, and people saying, well, in schools we're having this problem, therefore the teachers should have this hardware, they should have these items. It's like, okay, would you say that about kids? Like, would you say, oh, you're going out to the park, well, don't forget your thing, don't forget your hardware. It's just ridiculous, isn't it, to say that this is necessary because there are bad people. No, it's necessary because there are so many. And it's really as simple as that. If I was there, because I'm not, I'm in Japan, if I was there, I would probably want to as well, simply because I'm up against so many. And that just opens it up to more possibilities of accidents, right? So that's my statement about that. As for the economy, Scott, it's interesting that people always choose this 40, 50-year time frame, because that's the one that I choose as well. And it actually, and everybody who follows me is going to go, oh, here he goes again. But it's the 40 or 50 years of neoliberal economics. It's the 40, 50 years of US, mostly, corporations seeking higher profits, lower costs, offshoring, and the government's facilitating that has led to you getting a whole bunch of cheaper imports, improving your lifestyle, and dismantling your economic manufacturing base so that you could have those cheaper things without passing on those productivity benefits to the population. And this is going to bring me into the discussion I want to talk about today about overdiagnosing. And so I think all of this is connected, and it is connected to that 40, 50 years of neoliberalism, and it is to reduce it to one, I can't say one word because it's a two-word expression, to one thing. It's industrial relations. Cinnabon, kids going to the park, healthcare, tariffs, they're all related to the single fact that not just the United States, so I'm not singling you out for punishment here, everywhere in the OECD has dismantled the industrial relations base that we had up until, even to the 90s, but let's say it started from the 80s. I'll give you kind of just an example I made up in my head about Cinnabon. In 1995, for example, when I was doing part-time jobs and things, and you had a disgruntled customer, the worst thing you would have been is sarcastic or, a bit nasty, like, okay, here's your extra caramel sauce. And that's probably the worst that would have happened. And these days, it's like, no, you get that person, the girl, Crystal, I think her name was. I don't know if that's her name, but it suits. Going off on a long explanation of her philosophical worldview because she's completely burned out. She's completely stressed out. Now, I'm certainly not justifying her worldview. I'm saying we got to hear it because of industrial relations. Because when I'm doing my part-time jobs back in 1995, I knock off work and I go and chill. These days, people are probably knocking off their shift and going to their next shift at their next job and still not having enough to pay the rent and still not having enough to have healthcare and still not having enough to get Christmas presents for their kids and things like that. So Crystal, if that's her real name, is so stressed out, way more than people of her age were in my generation and before. Doesn't justify her worldview. I'll get to that. So there were always people like her that existed and had these thoughts. They just kept them to themselves. I would agree with people that this administration and the first incarnation of it, yes, has let out more than a dog whistle to these people to feel free to come out and say how they feel. But let's not deny that that was always there. It was always there. Also, when it comes to customers, it's very easy when you are, different different ethnic backgrounds, that it's when you're in the heat of the moment, it's easy to pick on that one thing. I get a lot with my Japanese videos. The first thing people point out is that I'm not Japanese, and they refer to my race. So in this case, when you've got a disgruntled customer in front of you, that's the easiest thing to target when you're stressed. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's right, but it's understandable that's what you reach for. But customers are not good either. And this is what I mean. When I go back to I'm choosing the mid-90s because that's when I was working part-time jobs. Earlier, actually. But anyway. Customers were not as mean as they are now. And I really think it comes down to the fact that society as a whole has decayed to this point because we're all so stressed. We're all so not capable of having the kind of hope and expectations of things getting better that our parents and grandparents had. And this is borne out by statistics. I can't recall them offhand, but it is very much the case that up until the 80s and 90s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we could guarantee that your children were going to earn more than you. And I think it was something like 90%. And then by 1990, it was about 50%. And I would imagine now that that's even lower. And I think what we've done is we've come to the end of this cycle of experimentation. We had a previous cycle, which was the Keynesian, Galbraithian mixed economy period that created a robust middle class. And then we experimented with freeing up capitalism, and you got Cinnabon. You got no universal health care, and you got the idea of me sitting here in Japan thinking, if I lived in the US and my kid was going to the park, I'd make sure he was taking his hardware with him. It's that kind of social decay that I think is rooted in industrial relations. I'll have to take a little break there. I've actually said everything I wanted to say today, almost, without detail. So I'll come back to that a bit later. So let's see. I can see that I've been watching out of the corner of my eye that my comments have been going wild. So I'm going to scroll back and see what people were saying. And, okay. Oh, not so much. Okay. Oh, I guess it's just been people cycling in and out. Okay. Lang is disgruntled. Yeah. Well, I am. Yeah. I mean, but I'm disgruntled, but not at society, at myself. I shared with you guys a long time ago that one of my favorite personal philosophies is that you create your own problems. And if you look at most of the things that are happening in your life that are going not the way you want them to, the base can be seen as decisions that you made. So I do take a lot of personal responsibility for my own disgruntled state. But overall, on a macro level, I think the conditions we have in society and now industrial relations are the main cause of that. Lang, what are you talking about, man? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, let's have a look. So one of the things that I was going to talk about was I was watching a video, and this is why I'm saying, if you haven't followed me, go ahead and follow now, because you ever want to find somebody, again, it's really hard. And I didn't follow this guy, and I have watched a few of his videos, and he takes statistics and he really analyzes them, and he seems to do it very, really not unbiased. And so I do like him, and I should have followed him, and now I can't find him. But one of the last videos I saw that he was talking about, and this kind of really sums things up for me, is that 32 or something, let's just round it off, 30% of like Amherst and Harvard intake population have disabilities. Just think about that, right? 30% of the intake, the people that get into Ivy League universities, are considered to have a disability. How the heck does that happen? Is that DEI gone wild? No. It's accommodations. And it's something that I'm not going to judge, but I'm going to question. Why don't I judge it? Because I think everyone should have accommodations, i.e. the system needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up. But that's getting way ahead of myself. So around 30% of the intake have disabilities. They have accommodations. That is, they are diagnosed with something so that they can get benefits to help them do their SATs, to do their testing. So, for example, if you get diagnosed with having short attention spans, or you're sensitive to noisy locations, you can get a better testing environment that results in you getting a better test score, which results in you getting into an Ivy League university, right? So, how does it come about that 30% of the intake have this? Well, they're the people with the top scores, obviously. So how are these kids getting these top scores? Well, their schools, their elite high schools, are encouraging all their parents to seek out diagnoses, to go to psychiatrists, psychologists, GPs, whatever it takes. And if you can afford that, you're going to do it. Go to these doctors and say to them, hey, my kid is possibly on the spectrum or possibly has this problem. Can you talk to them? Doctors don't know. They spend 10 minutes with someone. Maybe they have a few sessions with them. But, they ultimately get this diagnosis. And that gets the kids to have these opportunities to take their tests. For example, one of the accommodations is you get 1.5 more time than regular. This is where I'll sneak in my ideology. Regular poorer kids who don't have access to GPs and psychiatrists and psychologists and teams of experts to help them get a diagnosis. So you get 1.5 times more time to do your SAT. You're going to get a better score. You're going to get a better environment to take the test in, and you're already going to do better, of course, because you're going to a better school where you get a better education in the first place, and you get all the benefits of that. How do you say that in English? Kyoiku neshin. Is there anyone Japanese here? Kyoiku neshin. I don't know how to translate in Japanese. The environment of a family that is very supportive of your education. And so you end up you're already going to get a good score, and now you get these other things on top of that. You get an even better score. And so I was thinking about that, and it was like, okay, well, that's just the way of the world. That's the way it is. But then I was thinking, hold on. The lower end of the economic spectrum is all suffering now because everyone's saying that we've gone too woke, right? That every kid has a problem, and we're letting kids run wild, and they're all complaining that they've got something wrong with them. Well, 30% of Harvard's intake has a disability. So if we judge it by that, then the kids do have something wrong with them. So I think it's really, ultimately, it came to me that, of course, that situation is unfair. But also, don't you think that socially it's unfair that we blame woke for the increase in diagnosis when it's actually just a high economic end of the spectrum group of people that are actually pushing these diagnoses up, and that they're actually part of the problem, probably the same people that are complaining and the same people that are voting to get rid of DEI and to get rid of all these kinds of things for the other end of the economic spectrum. And then I thought, isn't it funny that we say that, I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's a good opportunity for me to go and have a look at the comments. Privilege. Okay. Okay. I'll see if I get my train of thought back with a bit of coffee intake. Yeah, you'll have to give me a second to think about that. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So then I really went on this is all happening in my head. I really went on this thought process that, these diagnoses unlock access for the high end. But this is also actually happening at the low end. So we do see in schools and in general, kids getting a diagnosis when, obviously, because a lot of them need that diagnosis and we've learned these things and we're aware of them, but actually we're doing this at a lower threshold so that kids can, or parents and the community can unlock access to those tools and support services that have been locked up thanks to austerity since the 80s, 90s, 2000s. So if we think of it like this, we started as a society to, we closed the mental institutions, which was a good thing. We put people out and we tried to integrate them into the community. We put some of the savings from that into community support. But then gradually we kind of started removing that and cutting that, and people say, there's a massive homeless problem and mental health problem. Well, it's partly because we tried to do the right thing, and we did do the right thing, and we let people out and onto the street and integrated them, and there has been a great level of integration. I've seen it in schools, and I think it's fantastic. But we haven't governments use that as a savings mechanism rather than an opportunity to increase funding in the community. And this is also backed up by statistics, which I don't have in my head right now, that if we look at things like community centers, activities, places after school, activities, tutoring, a lot of things that were available in the 80s and 90s and 2000s have been cut massively due to government austerity, due to demands by voters to cut government spending. So what we have is doctors trying to do the right thing, psychiatrists, psychologists, teams of people trying to do the right thing and giving kids a diagnosis so that they can get access to things, and lowering the threshold to increase the number of kids that can get support that they need, because that support is not generally there. So my thought on this is, if we wanted to reduce the overdiagnosis, what we would need to do is to put more money back into community centers. And I'm using that just as a broad term to mean sports, study, libraries, community activities, events, all of that. That's what I mean. And I think if we were to consider this would probably go to some way to help the mental health and well-being of kids that are at that lower end of the threshold, that if they did have that support, if they did have that outlet, if they were able to engage in activities other than their phones and antisocial behavior, then perhaps they wouldn't need that diagnosis. Perhaps we wouldn't have to lower that threshold, and perhaps that would satisfy the anti-woke crowd and those people that say that we've gone too far. If anything, I think we've gone too far in cutting back on community support for kids. Which reminded me of something that I went ahead and forgot straight away while I was finishing that sentence. So, basically, that's why I kind of said in this that the Cinnabon incident and does everybody know what I'm talking about when I keep saying that? I don't just mean the delicious. I had Cinnabon, and it is delicious. But not just that. No, you don't know. Oh, okay. So a girl went crazy at a Somalian, I believe, customer, asked for extra caramel sauce, and the staff got into an altercation with them. This is in a place that I swear I cannot say the name of this place, but it's in a place, and you're going to have to look it up. I'm sure if you just put Cinnabon in the search bar of any social media, it's going to come up. And that just reminded me of what I forgot. Australia. So as of today, Australia has banned social media for under 16s. So that was the other thing that I was thinking about, that this idea that we need to get kids off their phones and into activities is absolutely true. And is Australia doing the right thing? Absolutely doing the right thing. Is it going to work? No. But I think it's a message. I think Australia telling the social media sites that they're banning this for under 16s is society fighting back against the kids being what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for that means turned into a product? But that. And that, you know, a ban is not enough. I would, if you're going to take that away, I don't think bans generally work for anything. If there's a demand, it's like the boats that are being attacked. That's not helping, really. That's not going to do anything, really. It's actually, you know, do you want to hear my thought on this? If you attack the boats and you decrease the supply, all it does is up the price in the community for the people that want those things, who now have to commit more crime to get the money to pay for that product because they're not giving it up. Anyway, that was a side rant. So the ban is good, but I would, while banning that, social media for under 16-year-olds, I would bring in community activities. And, you know, Australia is a really good example of a country, well, I guess the US is too, that is highly urban in its urban centers and very, very rural in its rural areas. You know, Australian farms, and I'm sure in the US as well, some of them are so big that you need a helicopter to get across the farm. And kids that live out there totally deserve social media. I mean, if they, you know, they can drive trucks and cars and motorbikes and things on their land, they can have social media. Okay. All right, I'm just trying to read my comments. How long have I been going? Half an hour. Okay. Is a person still here? Okay. So if you haven't followed, please go ahead and follow. Thanks, Ava. I'm Ava. I'm reading all your comments and I'm loving them. They're great. Okay. Okay. So, you know, that was I just, you know, I worry about kids being blamed for how they are. And I also worry about parents being blamed for how kids are. Now, of course, I totally believe in personal responsibility. I do believe that parents are responsible for what their children do. Not totally. And at the same time, children cannot totally be held responsible for the things they do. The girl in Cinnabon who declared things about herself, I don't think she can be held responsible for that either completely. Yes, there is some personal responsibility, but I think we as a society and the government as an economy and corporations as part of the economy also have a responsibility in having created the situation whereby people are, you know, behaving like this. I don't think it's, you know, I ultimately, if I was to reduce it to a simple sentence, is I don't blame woke, I blame the economy. I don't blame woke, I blame neoliberal economics. Yeah, sorry about people that don't know what the Cinnabon thing is. I can't say it. You know, use your imagination. Hey, Harold, thanks for tapping it out there. If you haven't followed, please go ahead and follow. And I'll see if I can. There was a whole lot of things I want to talk about today. But that's basically it, you know. That in a nutshell, we have an overdiagnosing problem because it's the only way to unlock access to support. And that is wrong, and I don't think the answer is to be targeting parents and children for that. So I think it really belongs to the corporations and the government to deal with that, because it's a wages issue ultimately. If I'm working at a part-time job and I'm copping abuse from customers, the more I earn, the more I'm going to take. It's pretty simple. And so, pay your staff more and they'll put up with more. But unfortunately, it's customers too. Japan is a low law country. I think statistically one of the lowest numbers of laws in the developed world, right? And yet they had to pass an ordinance in Tokyo that allowed staff, public-facing staff, this is Japan, to call the police on customers that were harassing them. Because, we don't have that here where assault is verbal assault is assault. It's not. That's not a thing here. So, but it is in that sense. It is in the customer public facing employment now that you can, and it's partly because we have an aged problem and people get old and cranky, and it's partly a disconnect with technology because Japan is increasingly becoming cashless, and Japan has always been a high cash use society. Even with the advent of debit and credit cards, they held on to cash. And so there's a technology disconnect that customers are having at the interface between the staff in the shops and the customers, having to go through processes that they've never had to do before, and it's stressful for everyone. Yeah, verbal can be worse. Okay, so let me see. I do have some. Notes here. Okay, yeah, I talked about that. Yeah. Okay, and just is Ray here? Ray wanted some of these, which I don't know if I can actually allowed to show these. These are the things that, this is funny. I'll tell you something. There's a whole thing going on in the Japanese media about foreigners coming to Japan and somehow accessing Japan's healthcare system and getting treatment and then going home without paying for it, right? And I've already said in another video, I'm sure that absolutely happens. Positive that happens, not disputing that. But the bigger cost is the millions of people that are going to the doctor every day so that they can get these. And these are painkiller infused tape, patches that you put on your body to ease pain. If you've got a sore shoulder or a sore back, I can go and buy these at any drugstore, any pharmacy. I can go buy them. But if I go to my doctor, my GP, and he says, yes, you have a condition, you have a sore back, which I know I have, then I can get them cheaper. No, I'm not selling them, Ava. I should. And so, that is the biggest drain on the healthcare system. But that is in the news, but not as much because, it's not fun. That's not exciting. It's better to talk about foreigners that are coming over here and ripping off the system. And as Deanna says, it happens there too. It does happen everywhere. This is a fact of life. But what the government here is doing is going to talk about removing those things from that schedule, removing things from being available from the doctor. You'll still be able to get them from the doctor, but they won't be discounted. They won't be covered by the healthcare, which is totally fine, I think. But then somebody in my comments said, when I complained about that and stated that, they said, Japanese people that have paid into the tax system all their lives have the right to access that healthcare as much as they want. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how universal healthcare works. How it works is that if everybody just used it like all-you-can-eat buffet, the system would collapse. Yes, you are well within your right to access care that you need. But if you're doctor shopping and just going around to different doctors all over town, and I swear the next town and the next town and the next state to get a whole heap of these things at a discount, you're rotting the system. And, you know, somebody said to me, another thing somebody said to me was, I was complaining about the visa price increases. They're going to increase. When I did my visa application, it cost me like $100. And they're talking about changing it to 1,000 or even 3,000. I even heard 6,000. But they're talking about changing it to at least $1,000. And someone said, when I said that's not cool, they said, oh, if you don't like it, go home. If you don't like it, leave. It's their country. And I thought about that. I was like, their country? Who are they? Are they all the scammers and perverts and criminals and, all those words you can't say on TikTok, are all those people included in that? Their country? When you say it's their country, do they rank higher than me? Are they better than me because it's their country? What about all the people that never ever paid into the tax system? I have done for over 20 years. So when you say it's their country and that I should let them do whatever they want, who does that include? Are all of them better than me because I'm not Japanese? Anyway, I'll be making videos about that. Okay, let's see where we are. I'm going to have a look at some comments. We do not have a culture of losing face. Yeah. Okay. I think the whole thing about losing face is, yes, it is a thing. But I think it's kind of over exoticized. Over it. No, it's not. It's not just that face. Okay, this is how I'll frame this. It's not just that losing face is emotional. It's institutionalized. I'll give you an example. Somebody I know got caught for a DUI. Now, that in any other country would be the end of it. He lost his license and then paid a fine. But then here, that's going to affect your business. It gets put in the newspaper, published in the newspaper, so you're shamed. And it gets told to everybody. And so, yes, it is personally, emotionally, you feel ashamed, but it is institutionalized in the sense that there is ongoing punishment that is real and not in that sense emotional. It exists and is effective and will cost you in your life. So another example that is very different to that is two boys are walking home from school. They drop into one boy's house and the parents are not there, and one of the boys, as they're roughhousing, breaks his arm. So, a parent takes them to the hospital, and the kid's arm gets put in a cast, and you think that's the end of it, right? No, the school is the first person that's called when that happens. So the school is brought in, teachers attend to the house of the boy that where the broken arm happened. They will also visit the home of the boy whose arm was broken. There will be meetings at the school. The school will attend possibly the doctor's clinic, and there will be possibly even a police report, because as they were on their way home from school, it's a school-related issue, and the school has some responsibility in that, because it's the school's duty to tell the children and to enforce and educate the children to go home directly and don't dilly-dally and don't go to people's houses and break your arm. And so there's a whole lot of apologizing and a whole lot of people involved. So when we say they lose face, it's yes, because it adds so much more work. It adds so much more apologizing, and there's so much more interconnectedness and responsibility at a community level that when you are about to do something that you think maybe you shouldn't do, you think twice about it, which is, in individualistic societies, is not sitting there in the back of your mind as a huge deterrent. So kids here, I mean, even shoplifting, for example. If a kid is caught shoplifting, the first place that will be called is not their parents, but the school, and then the police, and then the parents, and then everybody will be involved, so that child will not just feel the wrath of their parents, but the police, the shop owner, and their school, and it will be made public. So that is, really what face means. It doesn't just mean you feel some responsibility. You know that the world is going to come down on you when you do something wrong. And that's the difference here as opposed to, somewhere like Australia or the US, I imagine. Okay. Okay. Yes, I remember all that from my psychology studies, behaviorism. Okay. I think I pretty much... Oh, okay. I did want to talk a little bit more about this guy, Scott, whose comments I didn't approve. One of the other things he said was that other MAGA talking point that we've been protecting the world, we've been the world's policeman for, the last 70 years. And it's like, hold on. You've been protecting U.S. assets for the last 70 years. You've been policing the Silk Road of commerce for U.S. corporations. That's what that is. It's got nothing to do with us. That's funny. I like that one. That people seem to think that the U.S. was the world's policeman magnanimously, when it was actually fully supporting U.S. corporations dominating global trade. But yeah, shrink back from that if you want, and someone else will fill that vacuum. And that's what I always warn people about. Okay. I think I'm coming to the end of it. I think I've talked about a lot of things. Maybe. Have I? No. Okay. Yeah, Ava, it does sound like a small town. That's exactly what it is like. It's like, in a small town where everybody knows your business. And that is institutionalized. That happens in the cities as well. Everybody will know your business because it will all be, one of the things about living in Japan is you'd have no privacy. I mean, I go to the city hall and their whole it's divided into sections, but the whole thing is open plan. And so I go in there and I talk about my taxes and how much I'm paying and how much this is costing me and whatever. And it's like everybody in that office can hear how much I pay and can work out my income from that. So everybody in my area knows exactly what I earn. So there's no privacy or what's going on in my family or things like that. There's no privacy. And that's all of Japan. That's not just like country towns. That's everywhere. And the other thing about, I'll give you this little bit of interesting quirk about Japan. Public servants are not allowed to stay in the same section for a long period of time. They have to rotate. And the reason for this is so that they don't establish their own little fiefdoms, because before the modernization period, Japan did have a great public service, a big public service, and they would establish exactly that, their own little fiefdoms, which is why in China they have a massive amount of problems with corruption, because bureaucrats can rise to a high level. And in Japan, there used to be that. So one of their answers to that was that you could work in the tax department for 3 or 4 years, but then they'd move you over to the education department, and then they'd move you over to the urban planning department. And people just cycle through. And one of the problems with that is the guy in the tax department that knows everything about my finances is now working in the education department and knows everything about my daughter's schooling. And then, they end up knowing everything about you. So it's the other problem with that is that you can sometimes go into a department and they know nothing about their job because they just got moved there that month. And so they're still not au fait with all the rules and regulations of the department that they're in. Yeah, plus I stand out. Exactly. It's funny. I got, someone was telling me, I think I told this story to you once. Someone was telling me once, oh, so you like going to that place to take a bath? You know how they have these bathhouses, which is all totally legit stuff. It's just where you actually go and have a hot bath, like an onsen, but not an onsen. Oh, yeah, you like going there and having a bath, don't you? And I'm like, nope, never been there once. And the person's telling me this story is saying, I heard from so and so who heard from so and so. It's like they're completely talking about a different person with European background. Yeah. So I do get mixed up for the other ones. I got told that I was divorced once. No, that was a different one. Okay. Okay. All right, guys. Okay. I will sort of start to wind this up now. Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, I will take a couple of questions. Okay. All right. I feel like every time I do these lives, I feel like I've forgotten to say half a dozen things in the in that I plan to say. So pull, um, basically, at university I studied humanities. So history and economics and politics, and I even did anthropology, and then I did education. So all those things that don't get you employment. So I just and I came from a mildly political family, and so I've just kind of been interested in those things. And when I hear things that are wild, I I want to understand why. And every time I reduce it, it all comes back to the economic conditions. So for me, I feel like all the problems of society can be reduced to money. Because if you're getting into Harvard and you're using a doctor's certificate to tell you that you've got a disability, that's money. You're not getting in because you've got a disability. You're getting in because you've got money. So I think if you're not getting into Harvard, it's because of money. And so, I just kind of think that if we want to fix the problems in our society, bombing boats and putting tariffs on imports isn't the answer. The answer is to put money into the community, into sports and study and activities for all kids, regardless of income. For all kids. I'm not saying just for poor kids, for all of them. And to focus on putting guardrails on capitalism, keeping capitalism, and putting guardrails on it like we used to have, so that we can get back to having a middle class that had a situation where you could have a baby and go, you know what? There's a 90% chance that this kid is going to earn more than me. And that's gone, and that we have all these problems in the world. Correlation is not causation, but sometimes it is. What were the details of the social media in Australia? Okay, so in Australia, there is a new law that's banning social media access for under 16-year-olds. It's not sort of like the TikTok ban, in that if your social media site allows under 16-year-olds to be on there, you will be fined massive amounts of money. So already, it comes into effect today, but leading up to that, Facebook and Instagram and all those were just closing accounts for anyone under 16. So that's what that is. You will not be allowed to. I think, yeah, that includes Snapchat. I think what it didn't include was like WhatsApp or any of those, maybe even Messenger. Any of those apps that are mostly for communication are fine, but any of those ones that have a feed and like TikTok are all banned for under 16-year-olds, not just school hours, for all time. You're not allowed to have an account. You're not allowed to give access to anyone under 16. That's the law. Right? Okay. So, which I don't think is going to be effective, but I think it's a good message. I think it's a good message to social media companies to lay off turning kids into a product and sucking them into hours and hours of social media. But, it's on, as I've been saying, it's on the community to provide something else. kids should be doing sports, and they should be doing studies, and they should be hanging out with each other, but we've taken away those things. You know, it used to be that you could go down to a rec center and hang out. You could go and do anything, anywhere. You know, skateboarding, whatever it is you wanted to do, there used to be access to it. And now every time kids want to do that, they're told they can't. There's not the facilities, there's not the money, there's not the place, and there's not the safety to do that. So, you know, that's a you know, community issue. Yes, totally. Phone addiction is totally real. Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's nothing available. Compare this to what was available for kids in the 80s, right? And it's just not there. That's money. Simply that. And, you know, the other thing that I was going to talk about that I just remembered now is that we blame parents for this, and yet both parents have to work full-time now. My mom worked part-time. Now, if parents want to survive now, they need to work full-time. And then they have to, you know, leave their kids, and then their kids have got nowhere to go. And it's just, you know, we're creating our own problems. Okay. You know, it all comes down to money. You know, taxes would be better spent on, you know, if you wanted to reduce the cost of crime and the cost of missiles to attack boats, build a rec center. You know, fund coaches, fund tutors, fund places for kids to hang out. That would ultimately flow through and be better for your community than bombing boats and giving tax cuts to the wealthy in the hope that they might invest it. You know, you give tax cuts to the wealthy and they just send it to their Cayman Islands corporation that invests in US Treasury bonds. It's just absolutely pointless. Absolutely pointless venture. Have you seen the statistics on US T-bills now? The short-term, in an effort to, I won't go into this because I don't know enough about it myself, but it's costing you. It's costing you long-term. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is adding up, and it's adding up to the fact that, you know, companies don't invest anymore. Corporations don't invest in people anymore. They don't invest in wages, in bonuses. They get money back, they get profits, and they put that into buying their shares back. They put that into Cayman Island. You know, what was the statistic I read? 60% of investors in US bonds are based in the Cayman Islands. So you don't know who they are. I mean, they're everyone. But, you know, it's crazy. Okay. No, it's all legit, Paul. I mean, I'm not saying, it's not like, when I say Cayman Islands, it's not like the Cayman Islands of the 70s and 80s. It's legit, but it is faceless. That's what I mean. So, you know, your profit goes there legitimately, but it just doesn't go into what it's supposed to go in. You're giving these tax cuts back to the wealthy so that they invest. They're not investing. They're not. They're investing in their own companies that are hedge funds, and they're investing in shares and other corporations, and it's not filtering down, is what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah. All right, guys. On that note, I think I'll go. If you're still here, honestly, you have no idea how much it helps if you subscribe. I'll keep these coming.